Okay, welcome. So, CiNEOLA Presents is a podcast from CiNEOLA, a platform for Latin American stories, connecting audiences with diverse representations of Latin America on film. Every episode features conversations between filmmakers, artists, and writers from the Latin American community, and I'm really honored to be hosting today's conversation. My name is Isa Nakazawa. I live here in Oakland. I host a radio show called Rhizomatic Radio that explores the transformative and connective power of music. And I'm also a director at the Bay Area Video Coalition, where I have the opportunity to support media makers and filmmakers of all skill levels and ages on their journey to bring stories of all forms into the world. And today I'm really honored to be speaking with Melisa Liebenthal about her film Constanza, which is available now to watch on CiNEOLA. So welcome, Melisa. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'm happy to read a little bit about the film, or if you want to just give kind of a synopsis or a short description, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Hi, Isa. Thank you, and thank you, CiNEOLA, for inviting me to do this and for having my film in the platform. So Constanza is a film I made in 2018. It was part of my residency in Frenois. Le Frenois, it's a art and cinema, contemporary art and cinema program in France that is 2 years. And it works more as a long residency because you have to do a project per year. And you have to, from beginning to end, one project per year. So my first year project was Constanza. It's actually, for me, it's like my second film in my career. I started with a film called The Pretty Ones, which is more like a first-person documentary self-portrait. And after that, which had very good diffusion, how do you say? Distribution.
Yeah.
It went very well in festivals. It was very unexpected. It was really my first film. After that, I felt like, I obviously had I didn't have it all figured out, obviously. I didn't feel like, okay, now I'm a director, I'm a filmmaker. I know exactly what I want to do, what's my voice. I didn't know. So Constanza is the film that came after that first experience that was so important, obviously. Constanza is about Constanza, which is a real person that I met in Buenos Aires. And I basically decided to film her in the environment where I had met her, which was at my parents' house, where she was working. So I met her there, and I was very, kind of attracted by her presence, her figure, her energy. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, this is what I want to do now. This is what I want to do now in that moment where I was. And I wanted to really try a very different way of filmmaking than what I had done in The Pretty Ones, in Las Lindas, which is a very, it was myself behind the camera in The Pretty Ones. It was a one-person film almost. I was behind the camera alone with my characters, with my subjects, which were my friends. Everything was really small, really intimate and very, I don't know. Yeah, well, Constanza is still intimate and small and very, but I wanted to have more control over the situation. It was more about that for me. I'm sorry I didn't give the synopsis, but maybe it's easier to just read it, or I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you did a wonderful job. I can read just the two sentences. I think it's really beautifully written and captures the spirit of it. But it's Constanza is 35 years old, and she works as a housemaid at Irene's house, a 65-year-old woman who is temporarily in a wheelchair. The film focuses on Constanza's meticulous and almost obsessive gestures. As the hours pass by, repetition and melancholy become increasingly heavy until this apparently ordinary day cracks. I write a lot, and I think anyone who writes even a little bit knows how, grueling writing is, right? So I think I just have a lot of appreciation for capturing any kind of film, no matter the length or complexity, into 2 sentences. I did, right? It's kind of crazy. I did want to start by just thanking you for bringing the film into the world. I am someone who, I feel like the qualifier for cinema or excellent media or art for me is that it makes me feel a lot of different emotions. And I think as someone who works with nonfiction filmmakers a lot, I've been very recently in my life, because my background is more in poetry. It's been making me think a lot about what films or what subjects or what characters are kind of deemed as worthy of our attention as viewers. And I think this film, the pace and the attention was pulled towards this very familiar domestic workspace, where we're confronted, or I can speak only for myself, I was confronted with the familiar banality of cleaning, of putting on the rubber gloves, of kind of a sad, but not just sad, that term saudade, like it's not just sad, but it's like this longing feeling you captured in certain scenes. And I was really drawn by that, because I think a lot of films, the pace, the temporality, the way that the arc and the narrative, it's so fast, and the characters are so charismatic that we don't have a moment for ambiguity. We don't have a moment to be in a familiar reality. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. Like, as a filmmaker, how do you make that decision to be like, I want to pay attention to the ordinariness, or I want to bring the viewer into this, like, kind of this moment that is familiar in a way?
So as I was saying, Constanza is herself, and Irene is my mother, and she's also herself in the film. And that's my parents' house. So everything was as I said before, the setting where I had seen Constanza, where I had met her, and where I had the chance to observe her, which is what the film tries to do. And I think the film first starts from that kind of very intuitive desire to observe her, because that's what I wanted to do, basically. I just wanted to stare at her, to stare at her movements, at her gestures, at her extreme care she put to everything, to all these domestic tasks, which was for me very soothing. It put me, it was a bit like ASMR for me. It had a very soothing, like, I don't know, I was just very drawn to it, and I wanted to that's the first, that's how the project starts, with this feeling and this desire of observing her and giving her the space of the frame, the space of time, to let her do these actions completely, not interrupting, and I don't know. And of course the film, so I can talk about, for example, the script, because my background is more with it's more in documentary and maybe non-fiction, essay, experimental, so I come more from there. Now I'm working, for example, in a fiction script, but I'm working with someone else because it's really not where I come from. So for this film, I remember I was thinking how could I approach this. I wanted to write something just to have a guideline. But of course, that didn't have any narrative, because I wasn't interested in in things happening. It wasn't about writing things that would happen. It was about discovering what would happen in that when I would put my camera there. and then building the narrative afterwards. I mean, the narrative, the very subtle and small narrative the film can have, to find it afterwards. That was a procedure I was interested in that moment. To not, impose.
Yes.
Impose something beforehand and just finding out. Just being open to a discovery. It's something I think about a lot in my filmmaking process, because I see, it always starts with something very intuitive. It's an intuition, it's a feeling, it's a thought, it's an attraction, is a desire. And then you start researching, and I always do my research with my camera, so I start taking images. I start observing through the camera, and then I discover, and then I understand, okay, this is what I want, this is what I was appealed to, and then that's how the process starts. So for me, it's a lot about being very open and to this process of discovery.
That's a beautiful response. I felt that, I felt all of the kind of, I guess, the procedure, the process in the actual experience of it. And I think something I appreciated about the film was that quality of your attention and the uninterrupted ways that we are, welcomed into this kind of space allows the richness of the subtlety of emotions of everyday life to come forth. Because I think when you stare at something long enough, it's not just that one emotion. Maybe at first you're imposing the interpretation of her sadness, but then it lingers, the camera lingers and the emotions change. And there's the care becomes clear. And then for me, there was a curiosity before the final scene around grief. Is there grief? Is there, it just lingered long enough for me to wonder. And so I think that you did a great job of creating space for me to have that wonder, because so often when the things that I'm watching, I feel very manipulated. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like my experience of what I'm watching is being shepherded. And so I don't have a moment to react to what I'm seeing, because I'm supposed to feel empathy, or I'm supposed to feel, whatever. I think that also made me really aware of, actually, before I say this, one thing now that I'm thinking of what you said, I just read this really interesting quote about how experimental forms are often treated as elitist or kind of trying too hard to be difficult or something. But in actuality, the forms more often, good experimental cinema, it's actually the form mimics something more honest about how we experience our lives. The jumping between time and the kind of stillness is actually something that audiences can really deeply resonate with, even though experimental film is oftentimes branded as I don't understand, this isn't narrative enough. But then the actual effect of watching it is oh yeah, this is familiar. This is something I connect to. So, but I was thinking a lot about sound, because I think about music. I think in music usually, and I was very aware of how by stripping away music and really your film had kind of almost this hypnotic quality, because of the low hum of the laundry machine and the rubber glove scene where it's all the sounds of the skin. And so I was wondering, is that part of that early phase you're talking about with your kind of intuitive decision making, or how do you relate to sound in your film and in this film specifically?
Yeah, the sound was from the beginning was a very important part, and something I was conscious about, because it was part of this soothing, hypnotic, a bit regressive state of just staring at these precise actions. So actually a lot of the sound was reconstructed in Foley. We did Foley, because since the film at the same time I never know really, is it a documentary or a fiction? Sometimes, it depends. You can see it as both. But well, the shooting conditions were obviously closer to a documentary. It was very small team, natural light, like we didn't have like super much, production and control of the whole environment. So the sound at many moments, maybe the house where we shot wasn't as quiet as I would have liked, and so the sound was very contaminated from the street, the sounds from the street, the traffic. So we did afterwards Foley to be able to build this bubble where she moves. And then regarding the music, I mean, again, this film is very I don't know, it's still mysterious to me. I mean, it's still a very
I love that.
Yes, it's still a very mysterious film where I wanted to, I don't know, I wanted to let go a bit, and I wanted to just work with very little. I wanted it to be very delicate, like how you call this, lace, like this kind of very
like fragile
and delicate matter, and of course, and nothing is given in the film. Everything is like, what is this? What am I actually looking at? Where is it taking me? What's happening? Is it even something happening? It feels like something is happening, but I'm not sure. So all of that, I think, of course, the absence of music, in this case, absence plays a big role, because music in film, as I see it, tends to give emotion. Music is emotion in itself. So every time you put music in a film, you are conveying an emotion, you're giving an emotion, you're adding a layer there of. So I guess in this film, obviously, that didn't have a place, because the film moves very in the shadows, like in something that is more like blurry, more like diffuse. The light is very diffuse in the film. Like there's a lot of light, but everything is like in this, I don't know, diffuse quality, and there are no close-ups. I mean, no, I'm lying. There are a few at the beginning, at the end, but things are like a picture, like a frame, where you have to find yourself and you have to locate where to, what's the point of the attention.
So, I love that. Yeah, when hearing you talk about it, there is this really interesting relationship between presence and absence, or like what is given to us, and even that is slippery. Like the little bits that we know, we're not sure how much we can hold on to them. Yes,
definitely. And that was, I mean, we actually shot much more for the film. I mean, and that I only, how do you say? I'm sorry.
You can speak Spanglish.
Okay. No, that's mainly because of inexperience. I think I shot much more than what I ended up using, but it was in this logic of finding out in the moment. It is. I mean, I still think about these things. I don't know. It's a modality, a modus operandi that you can have, that you say, okay, I'm not gonna. I have some guidelines, but I don't really know. I need to shoot a lot. I need to shoot more than what I'm going to use, because I'm going to discover what the film is afterwards. So,
I love that.
Of course, well, it is a production format, if you want.
Yeah.
I just think it's good to be conscious beforehand that is the way you want to do it, and not be like, oh God, you burned all your money in shooting because you thought you needed all of that, and then you have and then you don't have money for editing. So I think you have to know if that is the way you want to do it. You have to be conscious. I don't know if I was so conscious in that moment. That's why I say
it sounds like you were, though, in terms of the impetus of the film was an observation. So I think there was a certain staying true to that, or there was like a letting that desire lead. That's
no, definitely. Definitely. It's hard sometimes to, I think, to work in that modality. Is that a word? Okay, or
yes.
that mode? Okay, great.
I'm all yes, I love that word.
I think sometimes it's hard because if you go to film school, and I guess in the US it's much stronger with the influence of Hollywood, that films are not done that way. You have to write a script beforehand. The story is like the most important thing. The story is king or queen, and you have to, and then you have to shoot, and you shoot what you wrote, and then you edit. It's much more linear in a way. And well, even for me, even if I didn't study in the States or anything, there is this idea that this is not the way you're supposed to do it. This is not professional, or all of that. And that's a process I am still figuring it out. And I think, well, the older you get and the more experience you have, then you start, it's as everything in life, you start realizing, okay, no, this is the way I want to do things. I don't care if film school or whoever experts tell me that no, I should do it differently, this is not the way. Is finding the ways that work for you, for how you feel comfortable, how the stories you want to tell. It's a mixture of so many factors in the end.
And it feels like for you too, you gave it's like there were I feel what I'm hearing from you, there's also levels to like both allowing yourself the space to find your voice as a filmmaker, and then allowing Constanza and like giving the agency to, whether it's your characters or in doc and nonfiction work, your subjects, like giving them the agency to kind of like write back against the expectations, like I think, or complicate them, right? Because there's only so much preparation one can do. And I think films like this, I think spacious films like this give me, they kind of activate my imagination in a different way, because there's something that I can't reconcile at the end. And so I have to work harder and by work harder, I'm paying attention, because I'm not spoon-fed, every kind of assumption or every emotion. So there's an uneasiness. It's like there's an uneasiness and a discomfort that's really just like when you meet someone that makes you feel a lot, or when you eat something that makes, it's kind of like it's an unsettling that's awakening you at the same time. But I think if you're not used to, I mean, you could say the same thing about music, right? Like there's music where the bass is so loud that you're, maybe it makes your body move, but you can't hear any kind of nuance, right? So I'm not saying there's good or bad necessarily, but I think that there's a certain kind of experience of watching this film and I looked at some of your other films, and they're all different, but they have a similar quality of like, I have to bring something to the viewing of it for it to feel like a conversation, or else I'm just like watching it and I'm getting something out of it. But in other films, I feel like, there's almost like a dumbing down of the viewer or something.
Definitely.
Something that I was interested in too is like the scenes where there is dialogue. And one of the scenes that really struck me was Constanza on the bicycle against traffic. And I really loved that there was still banality. Like it's the morning traffic, it's like, yes, I do these things all the time. And then, but the juxtaposition of this like pretty incredible, vivid dream of the half fish. And for me, it really resonated with the pandemic. I mean, normal life. And then the pandemic, there's been this need for all of us to rely on our interiority and on our fantasies and our dreams to kind of keep us connected to something in spite of our conditions. And I was curious about that moment for Constanza. Like, was that just there was like a dreaminess already to the film, but then her retrieval of the dream also felt like it kept her in a conversation with her faith, or like with something that was bigger than the monotony, and not just the monotony, like to your point, it's soothing as well, but like it juxtaposed really nicely against the like kind of the mundane, repetitious nature. But I wasn't sure if that was intentional or I don't know, but for me, I was curious about it.
Yeah, so at some point I had asked her, or she told me, I don't remember, that she had some very vivid dreams, very like recurring dreams. So I asked her about them. She told me a few, and I recorded them. We recorded them. And this one, again, I didn't know where I was going to use, I didn't know so much where I was going to use this voiceover. And then editing, it came, it became, it became to us with the person I was editing with that this moment in the bike where she's going to work could be a good place for this. And of course, she's talking about being half one thing, half another thing. It connects to the non-topic of the film, which is her gender, yes, identity, which is, it was always something that it's like something that is there, but I didn't want it. It wasn't the topic, so it's like, well, that's why I say it's a non-topic, because it's like something that's there, but I always wanted to not avoid, but like esquivar, like go sideways, like like when it's like an obstacle that you want to not go around, but never really touch. So yeah, that was that part. And yeah, you about the banal and all of that. Yeah, of course, the film is definitely that, and it's something I like a lot. I mean, I like a lot I mean, for me, I don't know, I realized the space of my home. I mean, or of that home where I lived with my parents in that moment. I just feel there's so much. I mean, I feel intimacy has already so much in it to. It's already a universe and a galaxy inside of there. I mean, I feel like I don't need to go so far to find like so much matter to work, and my films are usually around these very familiar and intimate places, and I mean, so far what I've worked and what I'm working on now, everything has a lot of not autobiographical, but a bit of, there's always some quality of that, of my own life, my own experience, my own space that I want to bring in, that I want to, and like, it's like I need to put it there to understand it. And that happened to me through Constanza, with Constanza, in relation to my mother in that film, which is not the main topic either, and it's not the subject of the film, but it's there, and for me this was very important afterwards.
What was that like to kind of view and observe your own mother?
Well, I mean, in the moment it was like the shooting, so everything happens in a very, you're there, but you're not really there. You're just trying to make things happen, and it's afterwards where you rediscover and you understand. And it happened to me. That happened to me. That I worked with my mother. I put her in this situation of the wheelchair, which she had been a few years ago, and that's where Constanza started working with in the house, because my mother needed help. So I don't know, I just felt this, in the end it was some kind of way to process that moment that was pretty, it was a sad moment. It was was a hard moment. So I felt this film in a way, even though I didn't think about it consciously. I processed some things with these films through Constanza, thanks to Constanza, and thanks to this space, to this observation, and to her very caring nature that she brings. And to this idea of two persons in a house that are together but not really. And each is in her own, like, a bit obsessive action. I mean, this obsessiveness of Constanza can have something very soothing and very caring and very... but can also, the flip side, I also discovered, had this a bit of obsessiveness, a bit like... not so...
anxiety.
Yes, which is what happens with the clips, the laundry clips where she organizes them.
All of them.
So yeah, it had that also came through. While I was viewing the footage in the editing, you talked about a bit this sad quality, a bit of this sort of melancholy.
Yes, that's the word.
This state where, I don't know, that came from the house, that came from these figures, these characters in that house and that situation.
It made me... Yeah, I mean, it made me reflect on, there was such an intimacy because it was taking place in a house, and there was so much about that place that feels familiar to me, where, like, our homes are places of a lot of doubling and contradictions. It's like there can be a feeling of safety and belonging, but it's also maybe the place where we unmask and where there's, like, a certain ability to, reveal ourselves, whether that's intentional or not. It's not a conscious act, but that's when, I was really moved by the scene where Irene, your mother, is crying. And my question as the viewer is, like, it almost felt like Constanza sees this, often enough that there is almost this, like, unspoken dance of privacy and care that was really fascinating to me, because there's this, like, really, it's not precise, but there's this space that exists between the film and me, between Constanza and Irene, and between them and their own grief. And so it was like, there's this poet, Rilke, who I love, who always talks about, like, love and relationships as two solitudes touching. And it felt like this was the film for that, where it's like, there's a lot of self-sufficiency of the characters to feel through and manage their emotion. They're not coming to rescue each other, but there's moments of, like, conversation at lunch, but it's polite, but it's not, digging, or, like, even the relationship we have to Constanza, to your point, it's like you're learning these intimate pieces of information, but they're left unreconciled. They're just kind of like thoughts or windows into someone's day where they go through the motions of, doing tasks and then writing a letter to who knows who that letter was, for. And so I think the film does this really amazing job of weaving all of this ambiguity and contradiction into kind of just like an open space where we all observe ourselves and that relationship. But then I had no idea these were real people or that was your mother. So I'm just like, wow, it's pretty incredible to me to achieve that level of observation with your own mother. Like, I think for me, I'm trying to imagine, observing my own mother through a different person's viewpoint, like not just through my own fraught relationship, but through this other person. So.
No, but I think this film couldn't exist if they were not themselves. I mean, this couldn't be done with actresses. It wouldn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense.
I think this is the type of films where it really comes from the people being who they are and the place being the real place where they live. it's well documentary, no? It's a bit like it comes from that and what emanates from that. Yeah, and I was thinking now as we spoke that it's that exercise is you have two people that are in this setting and without trying to force a narrative or a story or a conflict or a plot, observing them, well, in a certain way, there is a mise en scène, there is a way of putting the camera. I mean, there are a lot of decisions, but just what emanates from their relationship in that space, it's already that's the film, and of course how you build it afterwards in the editing, but yeah, I don't know if I makes
It's
sense.
beautiful. And I think what you said was really interesting to me too about, I think something that I really appreciate about this film that I would love to know how it's showing up in your new work is this idea that the identities that we either inherit or that we wear and occupy, sometimes for me it's really challenging, right? Like CiNEOLA, this platform is for Latin American filmmakers. And I think that there's, it's not it's familiar for us to be like, well, what is it like to be a woman filmmaker? What is it like to be, like a Latinx filmmaker? And I think in your earlier when you were talking about Irene and Constanza, there's an ability in the film for them to exist in complexity without having this like literal constant kind of reckoning with, my gender identity or my being in my wheelchair. But it is also a part of me, but it's not driving, the plot in this way that to me often feels very forced and very like strange. And I don't know what your experience with that is, but for me, that's always been kind of an alienating part of interviews, of having to articulate any work that I do, is there's an expectation that my identities are these like very literal kind of forces that, through my Uruguayan, it just feels weird. And so I think you did such a great job of representing or creating something through your observations that feels a lot more resonant to me than like, let's talk about Constanza's gender. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I wonder.
I understand.
How do you, is that, I mean, it sounds like that's a conscious decision for you in your filmmaking, but like, how have you seen yourself go through those decisions? And like, even in your current work, like, where are you seeing, how does identity kind of like show up and not show up? I mean, you kind of spoke to the sidestepping thing, but I really think that's fascinating.
Identity has been a main topic in my work, like this question of identity, who am I, what defines me, and all of that. I think is very linked. I don't know. Right now I think it might be linked to the period of my life, the age, between 20 and 30. It's a pretty definitory moment, perhaps. I'm not saying afterwards one stops thinking about it, but maybe right now I feel maybe that leaves place for something else. And I was talking about this recently with the person I'm writing with a script. But I completely agree. I mean, identity politics can have a flip side that is very trying to, because every individual is so unique and is a crossing of so many different categories in the end that I don't know, it's like in the end it's more about the possibility of experiencing beyond if you are this and that, if you're a woman, black, I don't know, whatever you are. For me, I don't know, it's a process. I don't know, I'm still thinking about it, but it's more interesting to think about the possibilities of experience, no matter who, what, why. I mean, just the human experience. And all the infinite possibilities of that. And in this film, of course, I was working with a person that that is trans, and in a moment where that discussion is very, very,
prevalent.
present.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was the word?
I said prevalent, but present.
Yeah, prevalent. Yeah. It's very prevalent. So it's like, so yeah, of course you can make something that is very too in sync with the expectations of the times and what everyone is talking about in Instagram or whatever, like pride. I mean, I think it's great. It's just that sometimes it gets very fixated, it's very crystallized, it's very static. It's like it's a flag. I don't know. And I mean, in my work I'm not so interested in flags or in pamphlets or in aligning to a discourse, the correct thing that one has to say. And then, so in this film, of course the film exists in the time, in this time, and in that discussion is very prevalent. But the film, I don't know, I still don't know. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to escape from that. But I still wanted to work with Constanza, and that is still part of herself, an important part of herself, obviously. But
yeah, I don't think it's avoidant at all. Like I don't think anything about how you observe. I think your observation is like the politics for me in your filmmaking is the politics of attention, which I think attention allows us to see all of the complexities that sometimes you don't have the language for. And film as a medium allows you to like see and experience something you don't have to explain, which is why I find it powerful. But I also think that you make bold decisions that are, whether they're intentional or not, they have a form. And the form for me is so interesting because that to me is where form can become so obedient to what you were saying. You said it better than I can't rephrase what you said, but like to the trend or to the flag. And I think I'm realizing like it's interesting to mention it on this platform. Like there's so much of being Uruguayan in particular or being South American that is in between or that is liminal. Like there isn't an easiness to, I mean, the story of Uruguay is dictatorship, but it's also immigration and it's also displacement and it's also layered. Growing up, I didn't have many answers of like what my mother went through. And so I think I gravitate towards films where there's things that are absent or there's an inability to grasp or reconcile, because that is also true for how I experience my life in deep ways and in subtle ways. But I think that if you're talking about Latin American film, you also have to talk about form. You can't just talk about the actual politics or the subject matter, like the forms in which these stories are being told, specifically this one, I think, I don't know, they really resonate. And I think there's something super important about expanding our vocabulary of how we see ourselves reflected and kind of playing with convention and not just accepting it. Like, I think that it's what you're doing is really moving for someone like me who often feels like alienated by a lot of those representations, where I can see, I'm not saying I'm above anything. I feel extremely entertained and like, I love all forms of stories, but I think there's something that has been missing for me too, where there is a little more banality and there is a little bit like of mystery and observation that I don't feel is paid to a lot of us, on film. It's like, you can't be boring. You can't be longing. You can't be unsure. You always have to be like so figured out.
Yeah, right. No, yes, of course. I think it's a luxury also as a filmmaker to be able to explore these things, not to be under some kind of pressure of delivering some product, or it's, being independent in that way. And that's also a very important discussion.
True.
Yeah.
That's a really important thing to say.
To have the means, but also the freedom to explore things like this, and to not try to please. I mean, you always want to please at some point. You want to give something. I want to give something to my audience. I want to have some generosity, but it always depends on. It always comes from inside the film. At some point, it's like you choose some things, and then those matters are what's gonna guide you, and what's gonna tell you where to go. You're kind of trying to follow it. You're not. It's not so much like riding a horse. I mean, maybe, but a bit of a wild horse. You know, you can ride it at some points, but at others
and then it rides you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit like that. It's always about controlling and losing control and then.
That makes a lot of sense. Are you, I know we're almost, we've been talking almost 45 minutes, but I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about your film, IKEA, and then a little bit about other things you're working on, or like how we can kind of follow and stay connected with other projects beyond Constanza.
Yeah, so Aquí y Allá, or Aquí y Allá, it's the other project, the other film I made during this program in France that I told you about. So first year I did Constanza, second year I did Aquí y Allá, which is still showing some places online. Maybe I post, I use my Instagram mainly to Instagram stories to promote these things. And that also is a lot about identity. I go again more to my own person, like first person narrative, and the story a bit of my family is more historical. It's a short film too. It's 20 minutes. It's much more experimental. And now I'm working on a feature. It's technically my second feature, but I see it as my first, because my first feature, which is the Pretty Ones, was very, as I said, it happened a bit. I didn't even realize almost that it happened. And now I'm doing it more in this more structured professional. Now I'm doing it the professional way, with a script, and everything will be more like in linear, in like steps like this. But it's a very fascinating process. And I'm actually now in Buenos Aires because we have shooting dates. So I'm shooting soon, if everything goes well. But no, I mean, if everything continues going well like this, I'll be shooting, and I don't know, I guess the film will be ready next year. I don't know. It's called The Face of the Jellyfish.
Ooh.
And it's also about identity, but this is it's a bigger project, and perhaps I don't know what I will do next, but maybe it's not about identity anymore. This will be like my peak on that topic, I think. I feel, but I don't know.
It's an amazing name.
Thanks. I can tell you a bit about what it's about. It's the story of a girl, 30-year-old woman, whose face changes from one day to the other. But this is not no one pays a lot of attention to this. People are like, well, it's not such a big deal. Your face didn't change so much. Whatever. And people just continue with their lives, and it's more herself who goes into an identity crisis and starts wondering and asking herself about, who am I now? Am I still the same person as before? Who do I want to be also? Who can I be now? Who do I want to be? What are my possibilities? All of these unleashes, and the film has a storyline. I mean, this time it has a narrative. but it also has a lot of like essayistic passage, reflection,
Qualities, yeah.
and some experimentations with image and different type of materials. Yeah.
That's so exciting. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I hope so.
It sounds right up my alley. Like, great. I really want to see the other film too. I was trying to find it on the Sheffield's website or the festival. I don't know. I think I saw something. I was digging. I'm like a research nerd with the Google. I was like, I need to find it. Yeah, because I was really interested in your use of maps. So I wanted to like see it. Yeah, I was really curious about it.
I can tell you after where to watch it.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to see it. Well, it was such a pleasure speaking with you a little bit. I'm sure we could talk a lot more about all of the things that we touched upon, but I really enjoyed hearing more from you and watching your films, and I hope everyone who's watching goes to CiNEOLA and watches it. It's up right now, so you can see it through their platform, and thank you, Daniel from CiNEOLA, for bringing us together.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me to talk to you.
Thank you, Melisa.
Thanks. Bye.